Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to my YouTube channel Diversity of Plants Zone. In this channel you can find amazing videos related to plants and their diversity throughout the world. Before starting my video, I request you all to please subscribe my YouTube channel. Today's topic of my video is about 5 kingdom classification system. So let's start the video. First of all, I will discuss what is a kingdom in biology. The system of biological kingdoms is the way in which the science classifies living things according to their ancestry over the course of evolution. This means that all the species that make up these 5 large groups, some recent theories split them further into 6 or even 7, have more common ancestors and therefore share some of their genes and belong to the same family tree. As well as the kingdoms of living things, there are other taxonomic categories within the same classification system, such as, for instance, domain, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. They all follow a hierarchical order and are dependent on each other, so some deviants include others. In this way, the domain includes the kingdom, the phylum, the class, and so on. Next, I am going to discuss about introduction to 5 kingdom classification system. Once upon a time, all living things were lumped together into 2 kingdoms, namely plants and animals. At least that's how I learned it. Animals included every living thing that moved, ate, and grew to a certain size and stopped growing. Plants included every living thing that did not move or eat and that continued to grow throughout life. It became very difficult to group some living things into one or the other. So early in the past century, the 2 kingdoms were expanded into 5 kingdoms, which are Protista, the single-celled eukaryotes, fungi, fungus and the related organisms, Plantae, the plants, Animalia, the animals, and Monera, the prokaryotes. Many biologists now recognize 6 distinct kingdoms dividing Monera into the EUBACTERIA and ARCHAEBACTERIA. All I can say is that the system holds true for this week, at least. It might even hold up for a century or 2. Accepted systems of classification have changed at a far faster pace than the species have taken to evolve. That's for certain. Kingdoms are divided into categories called phyla. Each phylum is divided into classes, each class into orders, and each order into families, each family into genera, and each genus into species. A species represents one type of organism, such as dog, tiger, shark, which is also called as the amoeba, Proteus, the common amoeba. Next is the Homo sapiens, us, and Asa palmatum, which is also called Japanese maple. Note that species names should be underlined or written in italics. Classifying large organisms into kingdoms is usually easy, but in a microenvironment it can be tricky. If you have had a little biology, a good exercise is to describe individual living things and to try to classify them as to kingdom. Scientists have been trying to classify living organisms in various ways for centuries. In fact, even Aristotle classified the living organisms on the basis whether they lived on land, water, or air. But biologists wanted a broader system of classifying living things. Hence came the 5 kingdom classification. So let us look at it in detail. Now I am going to discuss further about 5 kingdom classification. Very early on, scientists began grouping the living organisms under different categories. Some biologists classified organisms into plants and animals. Ernst Haeckel, Robert Whittaker, and Carl Woese are some biologists who attempted a broader system of classification. Amongst these, the five-kingdom classification proposed by the Robert Whittaker stood out and is widely used. Whittaker proposed that organisms should be broadly divided into kingdoms based on certain characters, like the structure of the cell, mode of the nutrition, the source of nutrition, interrelationship, body organization, and reproduction. According to this system, there are five main kingdoms. They are Kingdom Monera, Kingdom Protista, Kingdom Fungi, Kingdom Animalia, and Kingdom Plantae. Kingdoms are divided into subgroups at various levels. The following flowchart shows the hierarchy of classification, which is kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So this is the hierarchy of classification of living things, which starts from the life, then comes domain, then kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Next I am going to discuss about the characteristics of five kingdoms of living things. All the species in a particular kingdom have similar characteristics in terms of their growth and the way they function. Now let's look at where the family relationships that define the nature's kingdoms come from. So first characteristic is the nutrition. Autotrophic, makes its own food, or heterotrophic, that feeds on other living things. Next characteristic is the cell organization, which is unicellular, having only one cell, or multicellular, having two or more cells. Next characteristic is the cell type. Eukaryotes, the genetic material, is surrounded by a membrane, or prokaryotes lacking a membrane. Next characteristic is the respiration, which is aerobic, needs oxygen, or anaerobic, doesn't use oxygen. Next characteristic is the reproduction, which is sexual, asexual, or through spores. And last characteristic is the movement, which is self-moving or static. So next I am going to discuss about the classification of living things into five kingdoms. The first person to divide living things into five broad kingdoms was North American ecologist, who is called Robert Whittaker. This researcher proved in 1959 that fungi were not plant organisms. Previously it was thought that they were, and a decade later he proposed the creation of the fungi kingdom to differentiate them from plants. Whittaker's theory was widely accepted and the scientific community thereby added a new group to the previous four kingdom system, established by the American biologist Herbert Copeland in 1956. So this is the kingdom of the living things. So it starts from the Monera. Monera includes the ARCHAEBACTERIA and EUBACTERIA. Then comes Protista. Protista includes green algae, brown algae, red algae, ciliated protozoa, flagellated protozoa, and amoeboid protozoa. Then comes fungi. Fungi includes Ascomycetes or Ascomycetes, Basidiomycetes. Next is the kingdom plant, which includes Equiseta, Lycopodium, Gymnosperms, Angiosperms, ferns, and mosses. Then comes animal kingdom, which includes Porifera, Cnidaria, Platyhelminthes, mollusks, annelids, echinoderms, insects, crustaceans, arachnids, amphibians, fish, birds, mammals, and reptiles. Then I am going to discuss about the animal kingdom. The kingdom Animalia is the most evolved and is divided into two large groups, which are vertebrates and invertebrates. The animals are multicelled heterotrophic eukaryotes with aerobic, respiration, sexual reproduction, and the ability to move. This kingdom is one of the most diverse and comprises mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians, insects, mollusks, and annelids, among others. Animals are multicellular and move with the aid of cilia, flagella, or muscular organs based on the contractile proteins. They have organelles including a nucleus but no chloroplast or cell walls. Animals acquire nutrients by ingestion. This kingdom includes organisms that are multicellular, eukaryotic, without the presence of cell wall. They have a heterotrophic mode of nutrition. They also exhibit the great diversity. Some organisms are simple, while others have a complex body with specialized tissue differentiation and body organs. The animal kingdom is divided into many phyla and classes. Some of the phyla are Porifera, next comes Coelenterata, Arthropoda, Echinodermata, and Chordata, etc. Examples are hydra, starfish, earthworms, monkeys, birds, etc. All multicellular eukaryotes which are heterotrophs and lack the cell wall are set aside under this kingdom. The animals are directly or indirectly dependent on plants for food. Their mode of nutrition is holozoic. Holozoic nutrition encompasses ingestion of food and then the use of an internal cavity for digestion of food. Many of the animals are adept for locomotion. They reproduce by sexual mode of reproduction. Next comes plant kingdom or kingdom Plantae. Trees, plants, and other species of vegetation make up part of the Plantae kingdom, one of the oldest and characterized by its immobile, multicellular, and eukaryotic nature. These autotrophic things whose cells contain cellulose and chlorophyll are essential for life on Earth since they release oxygen through the photosynthesis. As regards their method of reproduction, this may be either sexual or asexual. Plants are multicellular and most do not move. Although gametes of some plants move using their cilia or flagella. Organelles including nucleus, chloroplast are present and the cell walls are present. Nutrients are acquired by photosynthesis. They all require sunlight. These are eukaryotic multicellular organisms with a cell wall that is made up of cellulose. They are autotrophs and synthesize their own food through the process of photosynthesis. This kingdom includes all plants. Based on the body differentiation and presence and absence of specialized vascular tissue, kingdom Plantae is divided into different divisions, namely Thallophyta, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, Gymnosperms, and Angiosperms. Examples are the Spirogyra, ferns, pines, and mango plant, etc. The kingdom Plantae is filled with all the eukaryotes which have chloroplast. Most of them are autotrophic in nature, but some are heterotrophic as well. The cell wall mainly comprises cellulose. Plants have two distinct phases in their life cycle. These phases alternate with each other: the diploid saprophytic and the haploid gametophytic phase. The lengths of the diploid and haploid phases vary among dissimilar groups of plants. Alternation of generation is what is this phenomenon is called. Next comes fungi kingdom. This name is used to designate the fungi kingdom, which include yeasts, molds, and all species of mushrooms and toadstools. These multicellular aerobic heterotrophic eukaryotes have chitin in their cell walls, feed off other living things, and reproduce through spores. Fungi are multicellular with a cell wall, organelles including a nucleus but no chloroplasts. They have no mechanisms for locomotion. Fungi range in size from microscopic to very large. such as mushrooms. Nutrients are acquired by absorption. For the most part, fungi acquire nutrients from the decaying material. Heterotrophic, multicellular and eukaryotic organisms are grouped under kingdom fungi. Their mode of nutrition is saprophytic, or they use the decaying organic matter as food. They have cell walls which are made up of a substance which is called chitin. Fungi also forms a symbiotic association with some blue-green algae. Yeast, mushroom, aspergillus are example of fungi. The fungi are filamentous, excluding yeast, single-celled. Their figure comprises slender, long thread-like constructions, which is called hyphae. The web of hyphae is called mycelium. Some of the hyphae are unbroken tubes which are jam-packed with the multinucleated cytoplasm. Such hyphae are labeled cenocytic hyphae. The other type of the hyphae has cross walls or septi. The cell wall of fungi is composed of polysaccharides and chitin. Most of the fungi are saprophytes and are heterotrophic. Some of the fungi also survive as symbionts. Some are parasites. Some of the symbiont fungi live in association with the algae like lichens. Some symbiont fungi live in association with roots of higher plants, which are also called as the mycorrhiza. Next comes Protista kingdom. This group is the most primitive of the eukaryotes and all the others are descendants of it. The Protista kingdom is the paraphyletic. It contains the common ancestor but not all its descendants. And it includes those eukaryotic organisms that are not deemed to be animals, plants or fungi, such as protozoa. As it is so heterogeneous, it is difficult to categorize it, since its members have very little in common. So protists are single-celled and usually move by the help of cilia, flagella or by amoeboid mechanisms. There is usually no cell wall, although some forms may have a cell wall. They have organelles, including a nucleus, and may have chloroplasts. So some will be green and others won't be. They are small, although many are big enough to be recognized in a dissecting microscope or even with a magnifying glass. Nutrients are acquired by photosynthesis, ingestion of other organisms, or both. Organisms grouped under kingdom Protista are all unicellular but eukaryotic organisms. These are the simplest forms of eukaryotes that exhibit either autotrophic or heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So some organisms have appendages such as cilia or flagella or pseudopodia to move around. Some examples are diatoms, protozoans like the amoeba and paramecium. So in this figure, this is amoeba and it includes the body parts. First is the pseudopod. This texture is called pseudopod and this is called contractile vacuole. This is food vacuole which is used for the storage of food in it. And this is nucleus, this is membrane and this is ectoplasm. This texture is called ectoplasm and this is called endoplasm as shown in the figure. Subgroups of Protista. Kingdom Protista is characterized into subsequent groups and the first group is the Charisophytes. The golden algae, which are also called desmids, and diatoms fall under this group. They are found in marine and freshwater habitats. Next is DINOFLAGELLATES. They are usually photosynthetic and marine. The color they appear is dependent on the key pigments in their cells and they appear red, blue, brown, green or yellow. EUGLENOIDS. Most of them live in fresh water. Habitation is motionless water. The cell wall is absent in them. Instead, there is a protein-rich layer, which is also called pellicle. Next is slime molds. They are saprophytic. The body moves along with the putrefying leaves and twigs and nourishes itself on organic material. Under favorable surroundings, they form an accumulation and were called plasmodial slime molds. Next is protozoans. They are heterotrophs and survive either as parasites or predators. Next comes Monera kingdom. This is the kingdom of microscopic living things and groups together the prokaryotes, which are archaea and bacteria. This group is present in all habitats and is made up of single cell things with no defined nucleus. Most bacteria are aerobic or heterotrophic, while the archaea are usually anaerobic and their metabolism is chemosynthetic. Individuals are single-celled, may or may not move, have a cell wall or have no chloroplast or other organelles, and have no nucleus. Monera are usually very tiny, although one type, namely the blue-green bacteria, look like algae. They are filamentous and quite long, green, but have no visible structure inside the cells. No visible feeding mechanism. They absorb nutrients through the cell wall or produce their own by photosynthesis. These organisms are prokaryotic and unicellular. They do not have a well-defined nucleus and also lack cell organelles. Some organisms show the presence of cell wall, while there are others without a cell wall. Consequently, some organisms are autotrophic and others are heterotrophic. Examples include bacteria, cyanobacteria, and mycoplasma. So, next is the type of the monerans. Bacteria can be classified into 4 types based on their shape. First type is the coccus, plural is called cocci. These bacteria are spherical in shape. Next is the bacillus, which is plural is called bacilli or bacilli. These bacteria are rod shaped. So next comes Vibrium, plural is called Vibrio. These bacteria are comma shaped bacteria. Next comes Spirillum or Spirillum, plural is called Spirilla. These bacteria are spiral shaped bacteria, and Monera has since been divided into Archaebacteria and EUBACTERIA. Next I am going to discuss about the classification of living things into 5 kingdoms. The classification of 5 kingdoms of nature remains the most accepted today, although the latest advances in genetic research have suggested new variants and reopened the debate among experts. Such is the case for the 6th kingdom of Carl Voss and George Fox, who in 1977 divided bacteria into 2 types, which are archaea and bacteria, and the 7th kingdom of the Cavalier Smith, who added a new group to the previous 6 for algae, which is called Chromista. So this is the Robert Harding Whittaker. The time period was 1920 to 1980, and he introduced the concept of 5 kingdom classification system, which are as follow. So first is the kingdom Plantae, plants, which are eukaryotic, multicellular, photosynthesized, non-motile, and sexual. Next is animals, eukaryotic, multicellular, ingest, motile, sexual. Next is fungi, eukaryotic, multicellular, absorb, non-motile, sexual. Next comes protists, eukaryotic, unicellular or multicellular, absorb, ingest or photosynthesize, sexual and asexual. Next comes Monera. Monera includes prokaryotic, absorb and photosynthesize, motile or non-motile, asexual. Next I am going to discuss about the objections to the 5 kingdom system of classification. Some scientists do not agree that algae and protozoa should be placed into the same kingdom. In some classification schemes, protozoa are placed into a subkingdom of the animal kingdom. A distinction between unicellular and multicellular organisms is not possible in case of algae in this system of classification. Each group has so many diversities that it is difficult to keep them together. For example, Monera and Protista contain both walled and wall-less organisms, photosynthetic and non-photosynthetic organisms, cellular or filamentous organisms. Virus has not been included in this kingdom. Archaebacteria differ from other bacteria in structure, composition and physiology. Mycoplasma are quite different from bacteria, where they have been placed along with prokaryotes. Symbiotic associations are not considered in this classification system. For example, lichens are organisms which are formed by the symbiotic association between fungi and algae. So next I am going to discuss about the biological classification of plants and animals. Biological classification of plants and animals was first proposed by the Aristotle on the basis of simple morphological characters. Linnaeus later classified all living organisms into two kingdoms, Plantae and Animalia. Whittaker proposed an elaborate five-kingdom classification which includes Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia. The main criteria of the five-kingdom classification were cell structure, body organization, mode of nutrition and reproduction, and phylogenetic relationships, evolutionary development and diversification of a species. So this is the five-kingdom classification. Organisms are divided into prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Eukaryotes are further divided into unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular are included into the Protista. Multicellular are further divided with the cell wall and without cell wall. Without cell wall are included into the kingdom Animalia. On the other hand, with cell wall are further divided into two types, which do not perform photosynthesis are included into the kingdom Fungi, and which are able to perform photosynthesis are included into the kingdom Plantae. So these are the five kingdoms which include Plantae, Fungi, Animalia, Protista and Monera. At present, the biological classification includes kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia, viruses, viroids and lichens. In the five-kingdom classification, bacteria are included in kingdom Monera. Kingdom Protista includes all single-celled eukaryotes such as the charisophytes, dinoflagellates, euglenoids, slime molds and protozoans. Members of kingdom Fungi show a great diversity in structure and habitat. Most fungi are saprophytic in their mode of nutrition. The Plantae includes all eukaryotic chlorophyll-containing organisms. Algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms are included in this group. The heterotrophic eukaryotic multicellular organisms lacking a cell wall are included in the kingdom Animalia. Some acellular organisms like viruses, viroids as well as the lichens are not included in the five-kingdom system of classification. So first of all, I am going to discuss about the kingdom Monera. The organisms in this group are prokaryotes, do not have a defined nucleus or organelles. Next, unicellular. Do any of them show multicellular body designs? Do not any of them show multicellular body designs? This group includes all some well-known bacteria, include blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. Have cell walls, and mycoplasma which doesn't possess a cell wall. They are the most abundant microorganisms and live in extreme habitats. So some of them have cell walls, bacteria, while some do not have, like mycoplasma. The mode of nutrition of organisms in this group can be either by synthesizing their own food, autotrophic, or getting it from the environment, heterotrophic. Many of them live in or on other organisms like parasites. Bacteria are grouped under four categories based on their shape: the spherical coccus, the rod-shaped bacillus, the comma-shaped Vibrium, the spiral-shaped which is called spirillum. So these are the bacteria of different shape which include cocci, this is bacilli or bacilli, includes spore in them. This is spirilla. Spirilla have flagellum, and this is the vibrio as shown into the figure. Some of the bacteria are autotrophic, for example, they synthesize their own food. They may be photosynthetic autotrophic or chemosynthetic autotrophic. Metabolic synthesis of organic compounds by living organisms using energy derived from reactions involving inorganic chemicals. And next I am going to discuss about Archaebacteria. These bacteria are special since they live in some of the most harsh habitats, such as extreme salty areas like the halophiles, hot springs, thermoacidophiles, and marshy areas. Methanogens, microbes in human welfare or useful microbes. And Archaebacteria differ from other bacteria in having a different cell wall structure, and this feature is responsible for their survival in the extreme conditions. So, methanogens are present in the gut of several ruminant animals, such as the cows and buffaloes, and they are responsible for the production of methane. Methane is also called biogas from the dung of these animals. Next is eubacteria. There are thousands of different eubacteria or true bacteria. They are characterized by the presence of a rigid cell wall and, if motile, a flagellum. Next is photosynthetic bacteria. The cyanobacteria, also referred to as blue-green algae, have chlorophyll, are similar to green plants, and are photosynthetic autotrophs. The cyanobacteria are unicellular, colonial, filamentous, freshwater, marine, or terrestrial algae. The colonies are generally surrounded by the gelatinous sheath. They often form blooms, algal blooms in polluted water bodies. Some of these organisms can fix the atmospheric nitrogen in specialized cells, which are called heterocysts. For example, nostoc and anabina. Next is the chemosynthetic bacteria. Chemosynthetic autotrophic bacteria oxidize various inorganic substances such as nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia, and use the released energy for their ATP production. They play a great role in recycling nutrients like the nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and sulfur. Next is heterotrophic bacteria. Heterotrophic bacteria are the most abundant in nature. The majority are important decomposers. Many of them have a significant impact on human affairs. They are helpful in making the curd from milk, production of antibiotics, fixing nitrogen in legume, roots, etc. So these are the microbes in human welfare or useful microbes. Some are pathogens, causing damage to the human beings, crops, farm animals, and pets. So first is the cholera, typhoid, tetanus, and citrus canker are well-known diseases caused by different bacteria. These are the diseases which are caused by microorganisms, diseases, acute, chronic, or communicable diseases. Next is reproduction. Bacteria reproduce mainly by fission. Sometimes under unfavorable conditions they reproduce spores. They also reproduce by a sort of sexual reproduction by adopting a primitive type of DNA transfer from one bacterium to the other. Next is mycoplasma. The mycoplasma are organisms that completely lack a cell wall. They are the smallest living cells which are known and can survive without oxygen. Many mycoplasma are pathogenic in animals and plants. Next is the kingdom Protista. All single-celled eukaryotes are placed under Protista. Boundaries of this kingdom are not well defined. This kingdom forms a link with the other dealing with plants, animals, and fungi. In this group, we include charisophytes, dinoflagellates, euglenoids, slime molds, and protozoans. Examples are unicellular algae, diatoms, and protozoans. Their mode of nutrition can be autotrophic or heterotrophic. Members of Protista are primarily aquatic. Some have flagella or cilia that helps in movement. Protists reproduce asexually and sexually by a process involving self-fusion and zygote formation. First of all, I am going to discuss about the charisophytes. This group includes diatoms and golden algae. Desmids. Most of them are photosynthetic. Diatoms are the chief producers in the oceans. They are found in freshwater as well as in the marine environments. They are microscopic and float passively in water currents like planktons. In diatoms, the cell walls form the two thin overlapping shells. The walls are embedded with silica and thus the walls are indestructible. Thus, diatoms have left behind large amount of cell wall deposits in their habitat. This accumulation over billions of years is referred to as the diatomaceous earth. Being gritty, this soil is used in polishing, filtration of soil of the oils and syrups. So next I am going to discuss about the dinoflagellates. These organisms are mostly marine and photosynthetic. They appear yellow, green, brown, blue or red depending on the main pigments present in their cells. The cell wall have stiff cellulose plates on their outer surface. Most of them have two flagella, one lies longitudinally and the other transversely in a furrow between the wall plates. Very often, red dinoflagellates example is the Goniolax. Goniolax undergoes such rapid multiplication that they make the sea appear red or red tides. Toxins released by such large numbers may even kill other marine animals such as fishes. Next is the euglenoids. Majority of them are freshwater organisms found in stagnant water. Instead of a cell wall, they have a protein-rich layer which is called pellicle, which makes their body flexible. They have two flagella, a short and a long one, though they are photosynthetic in the presence of sunlight. When deprived of sunlight, they behave like the heterotrophs by predating on the other smaller organisms. Interestingly, the pigments of the euglenoids are identical to those present in higher plants, for example, euglena. Next, I am going to discuss about the slime molds. Slime molds are saprophytic protists. The body moves along decaying twigs and leaves engulfing organic material. Under suitable conditions, they form an aggregation which is called plasmodium, which may grow and spread over the several feet. During unfavorable conditions, the plasmodium differentiates and forms fruiting bodies bearing spore at the surface. The spore possesses true walls. They form the spores and their spores possesses true walls. They are extremely resistant and survive for many years. Even under adverse conditions, the spores are dispersed by the air currents. Next are the protozoans. All the protozoans are heterotrophs and live as predators or parasites. They are believed to be primitive relatives of the animals. And there are four major groups of protozoans. First is the amoeboid protozoan. These organisms live in freshwater, seawater or moist soil. They move and capture their prey by putting out pseudopodia, which is also called false feet, as an amoeba. Marine forms have silica shells on their surface. Some of them, such as the entamoeba, are parasites. Next is flagellated protozoans. The members of this group are either free-living or parasitic. They have flagella. The parasitic forms cause diseases such as sleeping sickness. For example, trypanosoma. Next is ciliated protozoans. These are aquatic, actively moving organisms because of the presence of thousands of cilia. They have a cavity which is called gullet that opens to outside of the cell surface. The coordinated movement of rows of cilia causes the water laden with food to be stirred into the gullet. For example, paramecium. Next are the sporozoans. This includes diverse organisms that have an infectious spore-like stage in their life cycle. The most notorious is Plasmodium, which is also called malarial parasite, which can cause malaria, a disease which has a staggering effect on human population. Diseases which are caused by the microorganisms. So this is the slime mold in red color. So this is amoeba, this is euglena, this is dinoflagellate, this is paramecium, this is diatom, and this is macroalga. Next I am going to discuss about the kingdom fungi. These are heterotrophic eukaryotic organisms. Most fungi are heterotrophic and absorb soluble organic matter from dead substrates and hence are also called as the saprophytes. Those that depend on living plants and animals are called parasites. Some fungal species live in permanent mutually dependent relationships with blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. Such relationships are called symbiotic relationships, and these symbiotic life forms are called lichens. And they can also live as a symbionts in association with roots of higher plants, such as the mycorrhiza. And fungi plus blue-green algae, cyanobacteria is equal to lichens. Reproduction in fungi can take place by the vegetative means, fragmentation, fission, and budding. Asexual reproduction is by spores called the conidia or sporangiospores or zoospore, and sexual reproduction is by the oospores and ascospores and basidiospores. The various spores are produced in distinct structures which are called fruiting bodies. The sexual cycle involves the following three steps. So first is the fusion of the protoplasm between the two motile and non-motile gametes called the plasmogamy, fusion of two nuclei which is called karyogamy, meiosis in zygote resulting in haploid spores. So when a fungus reproduces sexually, two haploid hyphae of compatible mating types come together and fuse. In some fungi, the fusion of two haploid cells immediately results in diploid cells, 2N. However, in other fungi, ascomycetes and basidiomycetes, an intervening dikaryotic stage N plus N, for example 2 nuclei per cell, occurs. Such a condition is called dikaryon, and the phase is called dikaryophase of fungus. Later, the parental nuclei fuse and the cells become diploid. The fungi form fruiting bodies in which the reduction division occurs, leading to formation of haploid spores. Many of fungi have the capacity to become multicellular organisms at certain stages in their lives. They have cell walls which are made up of tough complex sugar which is called chitin. Fungi are cosmopolitan and occur in air, water, soil, and on animals and plants. They prefer to grow in warm and humid places. With the exception of yeast, which are unicellular, fungi are filamentous. Their bodies consist of long, slender, thread-like structures called hyphae. The network of hyphae is called as the mycelium. Some hyphae are continuous tubes filled with multinucleated cytoplasm, and these are called cenocytic hyphae. Others have septi or cross walls in their hyphae. The cell walls of fungi are composed of the chitin and polysaccharides. When your bread develops a mold or your orange rots, it is because of fungi. The common mushroom you eat and toadstools are also fungi. White spots seen on mustard leaves are due to parasitic fungus. Some unicellular fungi, for example yeast, are used to make bread or beer. Other fungi cause diseases in plants and animals. For example, wheat rust causing fungi, which is also called Pycnospora, is an important example. Some are the source of antibiotics, for example penicillium. Next I am going to discuss about the PHYCOMYCETES or PHYCOMYCETES. Asexual reproduction takes place by zoospores, motile, and by aplanospores, non-motile. These spores are endogenously produced in sporangium. A zygospore is formed by fusion of two gametes, and these gametes are similar in morphology, isogamous or isogamous, or dissimilar anisogamous or oogamous. Some common examples are Mucor, Rhizopus, the bread mold mentioned earlier, and Albugo, the parasitic fungi on mustard. Next are ascomycetes or ascomycetes, commonly known as sac fungi. The ascomycetes are mostly multicellular, for example penicillium, or rarely unicellular, for example yeast or Saccharomyces. Next is basidiomycetes. Commonly known as the form of basidiomycetes are mushrooms and bracket fungi or puffballs. They grow in soil, on logs and trees, stumps, and in living plant bodies such as parasites, for example, rust and smuts. The asexual spores are generally not found, but vegetative reproduction by fragmentation is common. The sex organs are absent, but plasmogamy is brought about by the fusion of the two vegetative or somatic cells of different strains or genotypes. The resultant structure is called dikaryotic. Next is the deuteromycetes, commonly known as imperfect fungi because only the asexual or vegetative phases of these fungi are known. So next I am going to discuss about the kingdom Plantae. These are multicellular eukaryotes with the cell walls mainly made up of the cellulose. They are autotrophs and use chlorophyll for photosynthesis. A few members are partially heterotrophic, such as insectivorous plants or parasites. Bladderwort and Venus flytrap are examples of insectivorous plants, and Cuscuta is a parasite. Plantae includes algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. Life cycle of plants has two distinct phases: the diploid sporophytic and haploid gametophytic that alternate with each other. The lengths of the haploid and diploid phases and whether these phases are free living or dependent on others vary among different groups in plants. This phenomenon is called alternation of generation. So next kingdom is the kingdom Animalia. These include all organisms which are multicellular eukaryotes without cell walls. They are heterotrophs. They directly or indirectly depend on plants for food. They digest their food in an internal cavity and store food reserves as glycogen or fat. Their mode of nutrition is holozoic by ingestion of food. They follow a definite growth pattern and grow into adults that have a definite shape and size. Higher forms show elaborate sensory and neuromotor mechanism. Most of them are capable of locomotion. The sexual reproduction is by the copulation of male and female, followed by embryological development. So next I am going to discuss about viruses, viroids, and lichens. In the 5-kingdom classification of Whittaker biological classification, there is no mention of some acellular organisms like viruses and viroids and lichens. These are briefly introduced here. Viruses didn't find a place in classification since they are not truly living. So if we understand living as those organisms that have a cell structure, the virus are non-cellular organisms that are characterized by having an inert crystalline structure outside the living cell. Viruses are obligate parasites. Once they infect a cell, they take over the machinery of the host cell to replicate themselves, killing the host. The name virus, that means venom or poisonous fluid, was given by the Pasteur. In addition to proteins, viruses also contain genetic material that can be either RNA or DNA. No virus contains both RNA and DNA. In general, viruses that infect plants have single-stranded RNA, and viruses that infect animals have either single or double-stranded RNA or double-stranded DNA. Bacterial viruses or bacteriophages, viruses that infect bacteria, are usually double-stranded DNA viruses. The protein coat called capsid, made up of small subunits that are called capsomeres, protects the nucleic acid. These capsomeres are arranged in helical or polyhedral geometric forms. And viruses cause diseases like the mumps, smallpox. Smallpox is a disease, and herpes. Herpes is a disease, and influenza. AIDS in humans is also caused by a virus. In plants, the symptoms can be mosaic formation, leaf rolling, curling, yellowing, and vein clearing, dwarfing, and stunted growth. Next are viroids. Viroids are infectious agents that are smaller than viruses. A viroid was found to be a free RNA. It is lacked the protein coat, and that is found in viruses. Hence the name viroid. The RNA of the viroid was of low molecular weight. Viroids caused potato spindle tuber disease. Next are lichens. Lichens are symbiotic association, for example, mutually useful associations between algae and fungi. The alkyl component is known as the phycobiont and the fungal component is known as the mycobiont, which are autotrophic and heterotrophic respectively. Algae prepare food for fungi and fungi provide shelter and absorb mineral, nutrients and water for its partner. So close is their association that if one saw a lichen in nature, one would never imagine that they had two different organisms within it. And lichens are very good pollution indicators. They do not grow into the polluted areas. And this is bacteria or archaea. Both are prokaryotes. On the other hand, Protista, Plantae, Fungi and Animalia are included into the kingdom Eukaryota. So this is a table. First of all, I will discuss kingdom, then number of cells, then type of cells, how they gain their energy, do they move, and then I will give you examples. So first kingdom is the prokaryote. Prokaryote. These are unicellular. Types of cells are prokaryotic. Some are heterotrophic and some are autotrophic. And do they move? Some. Examples are bacteria and cyanobacteria. Next is kingdom Protoctista. Protoctista mainly unicellular. Types of cells are eukaryotic and some heterotrophic and some are autotrophic. And some can move. And example is amoeba. Next is kingdom Fungi. These number of cells are multicellular. Types of cells are eukaryotic and they gain energy by the help of the heterotrophic mode of nutrition, and mainly not they can move. Mushroom, mold and puffball is the example. Next is kingdom Plantae, and number of cells are multicellular. Types of cells eukaryotic and they gain energy by their autotrophic mode of nutrition. They cannot move. Trees and flowering plants are example. Next is the kingdom Animalia. These are multicellular and these are eukaryotic types of cell. They are heterotrophic and they can move very easily. The example is the humans and cow, etc. Next I am going to discuss about criteria for delimiting kingdoms. Whittaker has used 5 criteria for delimiting the different kingdoms. First is the complexity of cell structure, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Second is complexity of body structure, structural organization, unicellular and multicellular. Third is the mode of nutrition, which is divergent in multicellular kingdoms, photoautotrophy in Plantae and absorptive heterotrophy in fungi and ingestive heterotrophy in Animalia. Photoautotrophic nutrition is also called holophytic nutrition, while absorptive heterotrophy is known as the holozoic nutrition. Absorptive heterotrophy is saprobiotic or saprophytic nutrition. Fourth is the ecological lifestyle, like producers, Plantae, decomposers, fungi and consumers, Animalia. And phylogenetic relationships. So Whittaker 5 kingdoms. Whittaker's 5 kingdoms are Monera, Protista, Plantae, Fungi and Animalia. So this is our direction of evolution. First of all is the complexity of cells starts from the kingdom Monera. Kingdom Monera is responsible for chemosynthesis. Then comes kingdom Protista. Kingdom Protista includes all unicellular organisms in it. And then comes multicellular kingdoms. First kingdom is the kingdom Plantae. Kingdom Plantae, their mode of nutrition is autotrophy. It means they are responsible for photosynthesis. And their major ecological role means they are producer. Second is the kingdom Fungi, and their mode of nutrition is heterotrophy, absorption. Their major ecological role is they are decomposer. And the next is the kingdom Animalia. Kingdom Animalia are heterotrophy and ingestion. It means that their major ecological role is the consumer. So these are 5 kingdoms of Whittaker, 1969, based on cell structure, structural complexity, nutrition and ecological role. So first of all, I will going to discuss about the kingdom Monera, which is the kingdom of prokaryotes. The kingdom includes all prokaryotes, mycoplasma, bacteria, actinomycetes and cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. Along with fungi, they are decomposers and mineralizers of the biosphere. Monerans are basically unicellular. Monos means single, prokaryotes, and contain the most primitive of living forms. They are varied in their nutrition: saprobic, parasitic or chemoautotrophic, photoautotrophic and symbiotic. The photoautotrophs include both aerobes and anaerobes. The cells are microscopic, 0.1 to a few microns in length. Cell wall is generally present. It contains peptidoglycan and polysaccharides other than cellulose. Cells have one envelope type of organization. For example, the whole protoplast is covered by plasma membrane, but internal compartmentalization is absent. Genetic material is not organized into the nucleus. DNA is naked. For example, it is not associated with histone proteins. DNA lies coiled inside the cytoplasm. The coiled mass is known as the nucleoid. It is equivalent to single chromosome. All membrane-bound cell organelles are absent. For example, mitochondria, lysosomes, spherosomes, and Golgi bodies and plastids, etc. The flagella present are single-stranded instead of being 11-stranded in eukaryotes. They are formed of protein which is called flagellum. Mitotic spindle is absent. Gametes are absent. Gene recombination has been discovered. In certain cases, like otherwise, reproduction is by asexual methods. Some of the monerans have the ability to convert the dinitrogen into ammonia state. Next is the kingdom Protista, kingdom of the unicellular eukaryotes. All prokaryotic organisms were grouped together under kingdom Monera, and the unicellular eukaryotic organisms were placed in kingdom Protista. Kingdom Protista has brought together by the Chlamydomonas chlorella, which is earlier placed into the algae, within plants, and both having cell walls, with paramecium and amoeba, which were earlier placed into the kingdom animal, which lacked the cell wall. It has put together organisms which in earlier classifications were placed in different kingdoms. This happened because the criteria of classification was changed, and this kind of the changes will take place in future too, depending on the improvement in our understanding of characteristics and evolutionary relationships. Over time, it as an attempt has been made to evolve a classification system which reflects not only the morphological, physiological and reproductive similarities, but also phylogenetic, for example, is based on the evolutionary relationships. Kingdom Protista includes flagellates, euglenoids or diatoms, dinoflagellates, lime molds and sarcodines, ciliates and sporozoans, etc. Important characteristics are: it includes all the unicellular and clunial eukaryotes. Mostly they are aquatic organisms forming plankton. They have diverse modes of nutrition: photosynthetic, saprobic, parasitic, ingestive or holozoic, etc. The photosynthetic plankton are called phytoplankton. They usually possess a cell wall and constitute an important group of producers. The non-photosynthetic, wall-less and holozoic plankton are called zooplankton. Holozoic nutrition involves ingestion of particulate food. The protistants, having holozoic nutrition, are collectively called protozoa, though they have been excluded from the kingdom Animalia. There is a group of euglena-like organisms which have a dual mode of nutrition: holophytic or photosynthetic in light, and holozoic in absence of light or presence of abundant organic matter. Slime molds are a group of protista which are intermediate between wall-less and walled organisms. They are devoid of a wall in vegetative phase. In the vegetative phase, the nutrition is of ingestive type. In the reproductive phase, the slime molds come to have cell walls. The cellular organization is of two envelope type. For example, besides plasma membrane, internal membranes occur around certain organelles. Genetic material is organized in the form of nucleus. DNA is associated with histone proteins. The aerobic forms possesses mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, lysosomes and centrioles occur. Flagella if present are 11-stranded with the 9+2 organization of microtubules that are made up of the tubulin protein. Both sexual and asexual modes of reproduction are present. However, in embryo stage is absent. Tissue system is absent. Kingdom Protista doesn't seem to be a natural group due to dinoflagellates are mesokaryotic and not eukaryotic. A distinction of unicellular Protistan algae and green algae included in volvocales or volvocanes is not valid. Slime moulds are quite distinct from rest of the protist, and there are several evolutionary lines in Protista. Protista of this kingdom had diverse modes of form, structure and life. So what are the differences between the Monera and Protista? These are as follows. First I will discuss Monera and then I will discuss Protista. Monera, the kingdom consists of prokaryotic organisms. Protista, the kingdom contains eukaryotic organisms. Monera, the organisms are unicellular, clonial, mycelial or filamentous. The protists are unicellular or clonial. Cell size is smaller, 0.1 to 5 micrometer. Cell size is larger, 10 to 100 micrometer. Cell wall contains peptidoglycan. Cell wall, if present, contains cellulose. Flagella, if present, is unistranded, and flagella, if present, are 11-stranded. There is a single envelope system. There is a double envelope system. Ribosomes are 70 subunit in nature. So the cytoplasmic ribosomes are 80 subunit while organelle ribosomes are 70 subunit. Membrane bound cell organelles are absent. Membrane bound organelles are present. An organized nucleus is absent. An organized nucleus is present. Genetic material is a single double helix molecule of DNA, and genetic material consists of 2 or more DNA molecules. Sap vacuoles are absent. Sap vacuoles occur. Cell division occurs by amitosis as a mitotic spindle is absent. Cell division occurs by mitosis due to presence of spindle. Sexual reproduction is absent as meiosis doesn't occur. Sexual reproduction is generally present as meiosis can occur. So next is the fungi, the kingdom of multicellular decomposers. The kingdom includes molds, mildews, yeast, rust-causing fungi, penicillium, morels, mushrooms, puffballs and bracket fungi, etc. For example, all the fungi of the two kingdom classification except the slime molds. It contains achlorophyllus, spore-producing multicellular, multinucleate eukaryotic organisms. Basically, unicellular yeast are also included amongst fungi because their sexual reproduction is similar to that of some fungi. The organisms are heterotrophic with absorptive type of nutrition. It is either saprobic or parasitic. Symbiotic association occurs with some algae and higher plants, for example, lichens and mycorrhiza. The saprobic fungi excrete the hydrolytic or digestive enzymes in the external medium for digesting the complex organic compounds. The parasitic fungi absorb nourishment directly from another living organism called host. The body of fungus is filamentous and is called mycelium. The filaments are known as hyphae. Hyphae are either multicellular or multinucleate. Nuclei are very small and show in intranuclear spindle. The wall contains chitin and non-cellulosic polysaccharides. Cellulose also occurs in few cases. The cellular organization is two envelope type. In most cases, Golgi bodies are unisystemal and reproduction is both sexual and asexual. Vegetative body or mycelium is not clear externally in most of the cases due to its subterranean nature. Reproductive bodies are however apparent as in mushrooms, toadstools, puffballs, bracket fungi. Tissue differentiation is absent. Food reserve is glycogen in fat. The kingdom is important in nutrient cycling because along with the some protistans and monerans, fungi are decomposers and mineralizers of this biosphere. So next is the kingdom Plantae, kingdom of multicellular producers or metaphyta. The kingdom contains all photosynthetic eukaryotic multicellular plants and their non-photosynthetic relatives. On the lower level it contains multicellular algae, brown and red algae. So the other groups included in the kingdom Plantae are bryophytes, pteridophytes and spermatophytes. Important characteristics of this kingdom are as follow. Organisms are multicellular, they are eukaryotic, body form is less regular, growth is usually indefinite, organs are commonly external, irritability is poor, mode of nutrition is autotrophic. The photosynthetic regions contain plastids in their cell. Due to photosynthetic activity, plants are called producers. Most of the plants are restricted to land, seashores, and freshwater reservoirs. The plants are usually fixed or free floating. Active locomotion is generally absent. Structural differentiation into tissues is found except for certain algae. Food reserve is usually starch and fat. Some of the plants are heterotrophic and they are mostly parasitic. A few are saprobes. A small group of autotrophic plants catch the small animals and insects for obtaining the extra nitrogen, and they are called carnivorous or insectivorous plants. Reproduction is both asexual and sexual. Accessory spores are present in lower plants and embryo stage is absent in the algal group, but it is present in others. Next is the kingdom Animalia, kingdom of multicellular consumers or metazoa. Members of this kingdom are also known as metazoa or multicellular animals. The kingdom has maximum number and most diverse types of organisms. It includes all the animals of the two kingdom classification except protozoa. Groups included are sponges, coelentrates, worms and mollusks, arthropods, starfishes and vertebrates like the fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. Insects are a group of arthropods, outnumber all other organisms in variety and number. The important characteristics of Animalia are as follow. Organisms are multicellular eukaryotes, body form is regular, organs are internal, growth is definite, well-defined growing points are absent, cellular, tissue and organ system, levels of organization occurs in different groups. Response to stimuli is quick. A cell doesn't possess central vacuole, instead small vacuoles may occur. Centrioles occur in the cells and cell wall is absent. Plastids and photosynthetic pigments are absent. The organisms have holozoic or ingestive type of nutrition. A few animals are however parasitic, they live on or inside the bodies of other organisms. The animals are motile or mobile as they have to search for their food. Sponges and corals are an exception. The organism possesses the muscle cells for their mobility and nerve cells for the conduction of impulses. They are however absent in sponges. Reproduction is mostly sexual. Regeneration of whole organism and formation of spores are found in lower animals. Embryo stage is present. Ecologically, animals are consumers. These consumers constitute links in the food chains and food webs. And advantages of the five kingdom classification: separation of prokaryotes in a separate kingdom of Monera is a wise step because prokaryotes differ from all other organisms in their genetic, cellular, reproductive and physiological organization. Many transitional and intermediate forms are present in the unicellular eukaryotes, which had been included both amongst plants and animals. Separation of unicellular eukaryotes into kingdom Protista has removed his anomaly. Fungi have never been related to plants. They have their own biochemical, physiological and structural organization. Separation of fungi into a separate kingdom was long overdue. The five kingdom classification is based on levels of organization and nutrition which evolved very early and became established in later groups that are existing today. In the classification, animal and plant kingdoms are more homogeneous than they are in the two kingdom classification. So it has tried to bring out phylogenetic relationships amongst the primitive forms. And prokaryotes differ from all other living organisms in their cellular structure, physiology, biochemical and reproduction processes. Prokaryotes have got a separate place as kingdom Monera in five kingdom classification. Unicellular and multicellular organisms are kept separate. Fungi are placed in a separate kingdom as their mode of nutrition differs from all other plants. Autotrophs and heterotrophs are placed in separate groups. Five kingdom classification is more natural than two system classification. Five kingdoms classification is based on biocomposition and mode of nutrition, and thus it shows series of evolution. So these are the characteristics of five kingdom. First of all, characters: Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia. First character is cell type: prokaryotic, eukaryotic, 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 eukaryotic. Second is cell wall: non-cellulosic, polysaccharide plus amino acid. present in some various types, present non-cellulosic, present cellulose, absent, chloroplast, absent, present in some, absent, present and absent, mitochondria, absent, present, present, present and present, nuclear membrane, absent, present, present, present and present, tissue or multicellularity, absent, absent, present but limited, present in all forms and present in all forms, motility, bacterial flagella gliding or non-motile, cilia flagella amoeboid on the contractile fibrils, cilia flagella in some, none in most of the forms, cilia and flagella in lower forms absent in the most of forms, cilia and flagella contractile fibrils. Mode of nutrition: autotrophic, chemosynthetic and photosynthetic, heterotrophic, saprophytic and parasitic, photosynthesis and heterotrophic, saprophytic and parasitic, absorptive, autotrophic by photosynthesis, heterotrophic by ingestion. Next is the character of reproduction by means of the genetic recombination, conjugation, transduction, transformation or none, syngamy and meiosis, conjugation or none, fertilization and meiosis, dikaryosis or none, fertilization and meiosis, fertilization and meiosis. Next is the nervous system: absent, primitive for conducting stimuli, absent, absent and more complex is present. Drawbacks of five kingdom classification. In real terms, the phylogenetic system cannot be established till all the distinct evolutionary tendencies are separated. This is not possible at the lower level. For example, certain green algae are known to obtain hydrogen from sources other than water, like photosynthetic bacteria. Similarly, euglena can be photosynthetic as well as saprotrophic. Its relatives can be absorptive as well as ingestive type of heterotrophic nutrition. Our distinction between unicellular and multicellular organisms is not possible in case of algae. It is because of this that unicellular green algae have not been included in kingdom Protista by Whittaker. Each group has so many diversities that it is difficult to keep them together. For example, Monera and Protista contain both walled and wall-less organisms, photosynthetic and non-photosynthetic organisms, unicellular and filamentous or mycelial organisms. Viruses have not been included in this system of classification. Archaebacteria differ from other bacteria in structure, composition and physiology. Mycoplasmas are quite different from bacteria, and where they have been placed along with the prokaryotes. Unicellular algae are kept in the kingdom Protista, whereas algae like the multicellular organisms are kept in kingdom Plantae, but similar organisms must be put together. There is a diversity in kingdom Protista. Dissimilar organisms must not be kept into the same group. All organisms other than Monera shows that they are polyphyletic in origin. It is a great shortcoming of five kingdom classification. There is no place of viruses in five kingdom classification. Similar organisms are kept far from each other, for example, unicellular and multicellular algae. Limitations of Whittaker five kingdom system. This five kingdom system cannot differentiate between unicellular and multicellular algae because Whittaker doesn't include the unicellular green algae in the kingdom Protista. Viruses are not included in this five kingdom classification. Archaebacteria differ in their structure, composition and physiology from bacteria, and it's hard to keep each group together because each group has different variations, such as Monera and Protista contain both walled and wall-less organisms, photosynthetic and non-photosynthetic organisms, unicellular and filamentous or mycelial organisms. Mycoplasmas are placed along with the prokaryotes, but they are different from bacteria. And some biologists do not agree that algae and protozoa belong to the same kingdom. This five kingdom classification doesn't include the symbiotic associations. For example, lichens are a symbiotic association between fungi and algae. So, this is the first kingdom, kingdom Monera, which includes prokaryotes, and autotrophy is the chemosynthesis. And next comes the kingdom Protista. This is direction of evolution. Kingdom Protista includes unicellular organisms and eukaryotes. This is the complexity of the cell. Third kingdom is the kingdom Plantae. Kingdom plant includes multicellular organisms and their mode of nutrition is autotrophy and ecological status is producer. Next is the kingdom fungi. Kingdom fungi includes multicellular organisms and their mode of nutrition is heterotrophy and ecological status is decomposer. Next kingdom is the fifth kingdom, kingdom Animalia. It includes multicellular organisms. Their mode of nutrition is heterotrophy and ecological status is consumer. So all this is shown into this figure. If you like my video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and press the bell icon as well for further notifications. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Thank you so much.